All right, good morning. Let's see. This is today we're going to be talking about Uganda, and this is Pastor Jacob Miller.
Hello.
And you might notice that we have the same last name. That's because we're brothers.
Yes, we are.
Jacob is my older brother, and we shared a bunk bed. And I think, for right now, both of us have been married for a time, but we've still shared a room longer with each other than with our spouses, correct?
Yeah. You guys have been married now
11
years. 11 years, right? And we've just we'll have our 8th anniversary in August this year. So we
shared a room from what, like
when I was probably 3 to when 18. I moved out 18, so about 15 years.
15 years, yeah. All right.
So we got a while.
Now, the two people we've talked to previously, our cousin Justin in Macedonia, and Amro Dinsher, who grew up in Turkey but now lives in the Netherlands. They were actually in the country that they were talking about. Not so with you. So why did you come to talk to us about Uganda?
I haven't gotten Ugandan on here, but sorry.
So how did you come about to go to Uganda and so forth?
All right, so it started back in 2008. In 2008, I studied for 6 months at the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Pretoria, South Africa. And I did that as a study abroad thing. It was pretty cool. And most of the students who were at that seminary at that time were not actually from South Africa, but were from Uganda. The church there was just starting out. And so they were trying to get their guys into seminaries wherever they could. And so South Africa was one place that was taking them. And so I got to know a number of the guys who are now pastors in Uganda there. And when I was there, they said, "Hey, we're going to start a seminary someday. When we do, you should come and teach there." And I was like, "All right, fine, sure." And then they did. They started a seminary there, and then said, "Hey, remember how you said you wanted to come and teach here?" I was like, "Oh yes, I did say that, didn't I?" From that, I went last year in February. And for 2 weeks, I taught an intensive class on the book of Romans to second-year seminary students, guys who are now out on their vicarage, serving the church all throughout the country of Uganda. So that was a lot of fun. And I'm excited to get to share what's happening there and what that country is like with you.
Great. Fantastic. And Dr. Weber, we'll be doing this with him on Monday, God willing.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
yeah.
Good. Yeah. He was the head of the seminary in South Africa at that time. Is he talking about South Africa or is he talking about Germany?
We'll probably hit him up for whatever he wants to talk about. Okay. Yeah. More South Africa, probably. But yeah, we'll get him to talk about some Germany stuff too.
Good.
All right. So you actually have you've talked about this a lot. You actually have a presentation ready to go, correct?
I do. I have a slideshow for you that I'm going to show you now.
All right. So let's see. Here we got our first comment right here. We'll save most of the questions. Go and type them in, guys. But we'll save most of them for the end. Here's a question from Amanda. Are sports a big pastime in Uganda, and can you watch them on TV?
Yes, they are, especially soccer. And a lot of and I actually have a slide about this later in the show that I'll show about. Most of the teams that they follow are the European teams, especially in the English Premier League. Manchester United, Arsenal, big followings in Uganda, and people love it there. So I'll show you a picture of a bar that's out in the middle of nowhere, does not have any connection to electricity, but they have a solar panel and a satellite dish so that they can show the Premier League and the UEFA Champions League games. And I think it was Manchester United and Bayern Munich that were playing against each other. They had this on the, it's just this little place out in the middle of nowhere is going to show this game, and so they're really excited about that. They've got other sports too that they have on TV, and like their news reports will have sports sections like ours do too. But we watched a lot of European soccer while we were there, so it was good. Okay. So here's my slideshow then. You can see these are a couple of pictures from, the seminary itself. The top one is the students sitting out there, they're eating, and I'll show you what they're eating later. The bottom is one of the classrooms there right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about why it looks like that when I get to talking about that a little bit more. All right. So here's my first question. Does American TV ever mention Africa? And so according to researchers at USC, the 5 most mentioned African countries on American TV are, in this order, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya, Wakanda, and Congo.
The top 3 make sense. I can see that.
Okay, the top 3 makes sense, right? The bottom 2, there's a problem with each of those, right? First of all, Congo, there are 2 countries called Congo, right? There's the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo, which are just across the Congo River from each other. So which one are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you all know this probably better than most of the audiences that I talk to, but Wakanda is from Black Panther. Right? So it's not even a real place, and yet it gets talked about more in American culture than 50 African countries.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, right? Only Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa get more references than that. So 20% of all unscripted entertainment mentions of the continent came courtesy of the game show Jeopardy!
Thank you, Alex Trebek.
Alex, yeah, thank you. Only 13% of entertainment storylines that mention Africa actually included an African character. And when African characters did appear, 40% spoke only 10 words or fewer, and only 31% were women. Researchers found that 44% of TV shows and movies that did mention Africa did not refer to a particular country. So they'll just talk about Africa rather than talking about Uganda or Liberia or Central African Republic or Lesotho or something like that, right? Africa is a continent, and it's made up of a whole bunch of different countries that are independent from each other. And we just kind of lump them all together. And so I'm glad we get the chance today to talk about one of them specifically. So here's a map of all of Africa, and you can see this is where Uganda is. That blue line that runs across the middle of the map, that is the equator. So you can see that most of Uganda is in the northern hemisphere, like us, and a little teeny bit of it is in the southern hemisphere, right there. The equator runs through the country, which makes it very warm. So you can, I was there in February, which was technically winter, but they don't really have the 4 seasons like we do. For them, it's a dry season and a rainy season. And I was there at the end of the dry season, the very beginning of the rainy season. So it did rain a couple of times when I was there. And that's kind of how they track weather more than by spring, winter, summer, fall, and 2. Okay. Here's some fun things. This is from a site called Map Fight. If you haven't been there before, it's pretty cool. You can compare the size of different land masses or even water masses to each other. So Africa is 3 times, and this is the whole continent, is 3 times as big as the United States. And you can see there how the United States with Alaska, even with Alaska, fits into Africa. It's, the United States all of a sudden looks very small, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and then comparing something a little bit more familiar, perhaps, Uganda is 1.7 times as big as Illinois.
Okay.
So the comparison that usually gets made is Uganda is about the size of Oregon. And that's something we see on a map. The state of Oregon and Uganda are about the same size. But as we'll see in a minute, packed into there, you have 40 million people, which, what's the population of Illinois? Is it 20 million?
20 million is the number that comes to mind for me.
Okay, so twice as many people in just a little bit more.
Oh, we're way off. It's 12.6 million.
Okay, yeah. So
three times at least.
3 times as many people, right? In just 1.5 times as much area. Yeah, which means the population density is about half or about twice of Illinois, I guess. One of the big geographic features in Uganda is Lake Victoria. I'll show you pictures of that here in a minute. And it's actually just a little bit bigger than Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan, Mr. Miller and I are very familiar with, and we go there almost every year. But you can see how big that is compared with Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria is a very big lake shared by Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Make the areas around that. Lake Victoria, of course, named for Queen Victoria of the British Empire. And then the Nile River, which flows out of Lake Victoria towards the Mediterranean Sea. That is over 4,000 miles long. And compare that to the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is 2,348 miles long. So it's significantly longer than the Mississippi River. And the picture you're seeing there, the red line is the Nile River.
And the blue is the whole Mississippi River Basin.
And the blue is the whole Mississippi River Basin, right? Yeah, and
okay.
I think that's excluding the Missouri and Ohio River basins. In that picture, okay? So, if this is the red line's the Nile River, down here you have Uganda. Then it flows through South Sudan, and Egypt, and then up here is the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay.
I think, if I remember right, it takes water 6 weeks to go all the way down the Nile River, and not much of it makes it that way because of irrigation and erosion, or irrigation and evaporation, things like that. Here it is. Here's the Nile River, and Jinja that's the town where I spent most of my time. Their claim to fame is that they are where the source of the Nile River is, although that's a little bit disputed. I suppose I'm not because of where you track a river starting. But it is where the Nile River does begin to flow out of Lake Victoria, and you can see it there. So it's behind me in that picture is Lake Victoria, and then in front of me is the Nile River, and that's the sign that they have standing there to mark the spot. The other picture is the sun setting over the Nile River, and that was the view from my hotel room for the whole 2 weeks I was there. So that was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I could have had a bigger room, but it wouldn't have had that view, and that was worth it since it was just me. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about a little bit more about the geography of this then. So Uganda is a landlocked country, even though they have a lot of coastline on Lake Victoria right here. And they also share Lake Albert with the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they do actually have a navy. It all stays on Lake Victoria, and they're, at peace with Tanzania and Kenya. So they don't really, have a lot to do, but they are a landlocked country, and yet they serve as a gateway for other countries that are also landlocked or basically landlocked within East Africa. So for things to get to Uganda, they have to come by road or by train down here from the port of Mombasa in Kenya. And this over here, this is the Indian Ocean. And so the highway A109 in Kenya brings A109, then A104. That's back to A109 when it's in Uganda. I mean, the seminary is right off of this highway, actually just outside of Jinja, and Jinja's here where the red little mark is. That road is full of trucks. It's like I-55, going up and down central Illinois, where it's semis from coming from down here, bringing things into Uganda, but then also bringing things into countries beyond Uganda, bringing them into parts of Western Tanzania here, or actually there they say Tanzania. We've been saying it wrong apparently our whole lives. And Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, that's how they get, if they're going to get gasoline, it's got to be trucked in. If they're going to get a whole bunch of stuff, especially things that are manufactured, that's how it's getting into the country, either by road or rail coming in this way.
All right. Now, one quick note to the students. Keep asking the questions. We will get to them. Jacob Miller, our guest today, he has a presentation. If there's a question comes up and it's about like exactly what we're talking about, then I might put it up on the screen. But for the rest of them, we'll get to them. It'll just be at the end. But like one question is, why is Lake Victoria named after Queen Victoria?
Yeah. Okay. So this was the days of the British Empire as the Europeans were exploring and kind of staking their claim on parts of Africa. And so Victoria was the Queen of England at the time. And so the people who were exploring named it after her. I'm sure the people who lived around there had lots of other names for it, but that's the name that has stuck today. And it's still the name that the Ugandans and people in East Africa keep for it. You have to realize that, around this, in the country of Uganda, there are about 50 different languages that are spoken.
Wow.
And so the language that everyone kind of speaks together, that everybody, people learn in school, and if you're going to do business and things like that, you got to do it in English, just because there are so many languages and there's not like one dominant among those. So English is the language that gets used, and so they use a lot of English names for things like that. And it's kind of it's a holdover from the British Empire, because Kenya over here was part of the British Empire. Uganda, of course, was part of the British Empire too. Tanzania was originally part of the German Empire, one of the few colonies they had. But then after World War I, it became part of the British Empire also. And Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi, they were part of the Belgian Empire. They were the Belgian Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, so a lot of this stuff, it's kind of like, you said that stuff from the Indian Ocean gets shipped to Uganda and then it kind of like disperses the rest into the continent. So it's kind of like, would you say it's almost like a New Orleans or something?
Mombasa is probably more like New Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we have a good comparison for it, but it is a lot of trucks go through there and a lot of things pass through there without having that be their destination.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. All right. So Mr. Miller told me that you guys have done some work with population pyramids. And so here's, this is a couple of years old now. I think I put it together last year, and it was last year's. I don't know if they have it updated or not. Anyway, so the population of Uganda is just over 40 million. And just as a comparison, these other countries, Kenya and Tanzania, they also each have populations of about 40 million too. So even in their region, Uganda is more densely populated than a lot of other countries. Uganda, the people in Uganda, about 85% of them are Christian. The two biggest churches in Uganda are the Anglican Church, which is the Church of England, what they're called there. Here in the United States, they're called Episcopalian. And the Catholic Church is very big there too. Those were the two churches that very early in the 1880s, when Uganda was first being explored, that came in there. And there were missionaries working there well before Uganda became part of the British Empire, and had done that. And actually, and this is okay. So this is kind of a funny story about how this happened. Henry Stanley he's an American explorer, if I remember right. He's the guy who wound up meeting Dr. Livingston.
Dr. Livingston, I presume.
Dr. Livingston, I presume, right? And so he was exploring through there and met the king of one of the Buganda people, which is one of the biggest tribes, and it's where the country gets its name from. But at that time, it was in the 1880s, they were considering becoming Muslim because they saw how powerful the Sultan was down in Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania. And Henry Stanley is there and hears them considering this. Is like, well, I mean, you think the Sultan in Zanzibar is powerful. What about the British Empire? And we're Christians. Maybe you should think about that. He's like, oh, yeah, maybe we should. And then so, he hadn't actually told anybody who was a missionary about this. So he wrote a letter to the London Missionary Society saying, by the way, if you guys would come and send some missionaries down here, you'd probably do pretty well.
Cool.
And they did. And so much of the country belongs to the Church of England here still today. There is a sizable Muslim population too, about 13%, and the other 2% mostly are people who have come over from, or who were brought over during the days of the British Empire from India, and so they practice Hinduism. So it's really strange because it's very much a Christian country, and yet you see very prominently located mosques and Hindu temples. It's not like there's one region that's Christian and one region that's Muslim. It's not like there's one people group that's Christian and one people group that's Muslim. The Muslims are spread out throughout the country. They are, represented in all people groups and things like that. It's that's kind of unusual. So like in the town of Jinja, we're in the area where we were in eastern Uganda. It's a little bit more kind of heavy on the Muslims, but not very. I mean, like when I went to visit one of my friends in his house, just down the street, there's a mosque, and you could hear the call to prayer in the evening, and they just tune it out. It's just like, well, yeah, it's just there, right?
Like we have to do with the trains in Litchfield.
Yeah. Like you would do with the trains in Litchfield.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. So so you've done work with population pyramids, and you can see, and this is the truly one of the remarkable things about Uganda is that the population is so young. The average age of someone in Uganda is 15. It's half of the population. 20 million kids in this country of 40 million people. So like for the church, one of the main emphases they have is education and starting Lutheran schools and making sure the kids grow up with hearing the same word of God that you guys are hearing at Zion and Litchfield. All right. Ugandan people. I'm going to talk about them for a little bit. So one of the great things to talk about with people in Uganda and people anywhere is the food that they eat. And so I'm sorry.
I was agreeing and saying, of course. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so here's two things. This is food that I was served at the restaurant at the hotel. On over here, these are called samosas, and they are actually an Indian food that the Indian people brought over from India along with them. You can see this in a lot of East Africa. There's some influence from Indian cuisine. And so those are really good. So it's a fried thing. Inside there's meat or vegetables or something like that. Terrific, absolutely terrific. My wife loves these, and she was a missionary in South Africa where there's also a very big Indian population. So I sent that picture to her to be a little bit jealous, and it worked. And then the other Indian thing is this thing here on the fish. That is called chapati. It's a bread. It's kind of like a tortilla, but it's thicker and it's definitely greasier, more fried in oil. Okay. It's very, very good. And if you could use it like a tortilla if you wanted to. So then the fish beneath that is a tilapia.
Okay.
we have, you can buy tilapia fillets here and get tilapia served to you. But in Uganda, you get the whole fish. And that was one of the things that, well, I'll show you in a second. There'll be pictures of people fishing here. And these guys in the boat up here in this big picture, they are fishing for tilapia. And some of the other fish that they go for. There's a fish called a Nile perch, which is very good to eat. And then these other little fish, you can see them here. This is at a kind of a market or a store. And this is little tiny fish. They're a little bit bigger than minnows. And they just dry them out and you eat them. You're not going to clean a little fish like that.
Is there an issue? I know in some places in the world, there's like overfishing problems where fish. Is that an issue in Lake Victoria?
I know that they have some places in Lake Victoria that are fish farms, so they're trying to manage it a little bit better, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. That may be an issue. It may be something that they're trying to address. I don't know enough to speak about that. The picture down here in the bottom, this is how they catch those little fish. They have these traps, and you can see this is taken as the sun is going down, and these lights attract the fish, and then they get caught in like a net around that, and then in the morning the fishermen come and pick them up again. So that was kind of cool to watch every night, the fishermen lighting their little traps for the fish and then going away. So fishing is a big thing. One of the other things that they eat, or a couple of the other things, are goat and matoke. This was a meal that before I left, they did to thank me as a professor, to be able to spend some time together. And so this is a goat on a stick. Really good, actually. And here they are grilling it. This is Henry. He's taking care of it. And then the other thing, and you'll see this a little bit later too. This is matoke. It looks like a banana.
Yeah.
All right. It does not taste like a banana. It tastes more like a potato. So it's still starchy but not sweet.
Okay.
And it takes you have to, as you're eating this, you have to just tell yourself, this is not a banana. Not a banana. This is not a banana. This is
the texture the same?
It's not a plantain. The plantain will be sweeter still, but it's actually a form of banana that before it gets ripe.
Okay, so like is like biting into a really green banana then?
Yeah, and then this is steamed. So it's taking a green banana kind of like that and then steaming it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Pork is a big deal there too, and this is how you can tell somebody if somebody is a Christian or a Muslim. One of the Muslims are not going to eat pork, but the Christians will. So here you've gotten this was a restaurant on a side road in Jinja, and you you can see here this picture. The guy is just weighing out the pork. Freshly cut. And here's his cutting board, this thing with this knife here, and he's just weighing it against a rock. So do you want the big rock? You want the little rock, or with the pork, or what?
That's cool.
And so then that's how it turns out. Gets fried together with some, and there's some matoke in there, and some other things. And this guy here, this is my friend Enoch McBen, Dr. Enoch McBen, who is the president of the seminary. And it was a big part of the reason why I got to go over there. He was a student with me in South Africa back in 2008, and now he's went on and got his doctorate and is kind of trying to they're trying to create this seminary from nothing, and it's really pretty cool. And so roast pork's a big thing. Farming is a big thing there. Lots of people live in rural areas. Lots of people have land and can farm on it. So here's the guy with some cattle that he's got. I think he had about 12 or so cows on about an acre or two of land. So that's pretty good. This picture over here on the other side, these are pigsties that another family had, and this was a a thing that had been a gift from a church here in the United States to a family, so that they could support themselves by raising pigs and then selling them.
Okay, like it's like Heifer International, but the Lutheran World Relief has a thing.
Yeah, and I don't think this was done through an organization that called Hearts and Hope that does a whole bunch of a lot of scholarships, and they help run quite a few schools connected with the churches there too. And so this guy's name is Andy Wiggins. He works for that group. He lives in St. Louis, and he was showing. They were checking out this family that had received this and seeing how it was going for them, and it was really going pretty well because here's one of their pigs in this picture, and actually all of these pictures are from that same place. So on this place they were growing coffee.
Okay,
that's what's here in his hands. Bananas. They had pigs, and then they also had oranges, and the variety of orange that they grow over there. It stays green. Our oranges are orange, right? They start out as green and then they turn to orange when they get ripe. This variety of orange stays green. So, but then you cut it open and it's orange.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So this group in the United States had given some of these things to this family, and now this family is able to support themselves very well by raising these crops and pigs and selling them. So there's all the stuff for your breakfast, right? Coffee, bananas, bacon, and oranges.
No eggs yet.
No eggs yet. I think we might get to that. I learned more about bananas and how bananas grow and how you raise them there. Did you know that each of these banana plants, like this, only grows one bunch of bananas?
No.
Yep, just one. It takes about 8 months for it to grow from a tiny little thing like this to a great big thing like this with ripe bananas.
Then how many bananas are in a bunch?
Maybe a couple hundred.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's a bunch of bananas.
It's a bunch of bananas. Yeah. And then what happens is you'll get these shoots that grow up from the sides of the old plant. And so like here, this picture with two banana plants, originally there was one banana plant in the middle, and then these two grew up to the side of it. And what you have to do then is you have to, when these are little, like in this middle picture here, transplant those, and then they'll grow. And become really big and grow big bananas. But bananas are really easy to grow there. This is my friend Peter, who is also a professor at the seminary. And this is his garden, him growing bananas, and I got to eat some of his bananas that were ripe. They were delicious. It took me a couple of weeks after I got home to eat a banana because the bananas that they have there they have a lot more flavor. The bananas that we eat have been kind of bred and selected because they ship well. And here they don't have to worry about that. So they can just make really, really tasty bananas. Most of our bananas come from Central America.
Yeah.
Like in Europe, most of their bananas come from Africa. A couple other things they grow. You have sugarcane, which is here on this side. That's a really big product in that area. You have cassava, which is over here. And it's the root of that plant that you eat. And then goats. Goats, of course, are very big. And the seminary owns goats, and they just kind of get to wander around. And actually, that takes care of the grass too, so they don't have to mow the grass. The goats just have the run of the place and eat the grass.
Cool.
Works out pretty well. Let's see. Okay, you can buy about anything on the side of the road in Uganda. So up in this picture here, there's fruit, and here's a whole bunch of bananas for sale. You also got mangoes, and there's tomatoes there too. Down here, there's furniture. So here's a bed on the side of the road that you can buy. And I also saw people selling coffins on the side of the road too. That was
that's eerie. I mean, I can't imagine coming home Hey, dear, look what I got today.
Look what I got today, right? You know? Yeah, got a great deal on it. And then it's super colorful. Things painted in bright colors. And I guess the reason I took this picture is because the thing that you're buying here, this Airtel, is a company that sells airtime. So instead of having monthly plans for cell phones, most people in Africa have prepaid plans, and then they go in and then they buy more airtime as they need it. Africa was the first continent to have more cell phones than landlines. And that happened quite a long time ago. And cell phones are very, very popular in, lots of people have cell phones and are able to connect with other people that way. Throughout Africa, Uganda is no different than that. So it was interesting because like when I went there, I just got a new SIM card and put that in my phone, and then I was able to use their network from that too. That was kind of cool. The way people get around. So you do drive on the left side of the road
because they're a former British colony.
And most of Africa works that way too, where you drive on the left side of the road. So you got here the big trucks, and I was thinking we live right off of I-70 here in Missouri. How many of these containers that are coming through this part of Africa, these containers go all over the world. How many of those have been down my road too?
That's interesting to think about.
And now they're there. How many of them have gone down I-55 through Illinois and too? Ugandans are great at sticking a whole bunch of people on motorcycles. So here you've got 2 motorcycles. Each of them have 3 people on them. And the things that people can get on motorcycles are pretty impressive. If you're wearing a dress, this is how you do it. You just kind of go side saddle on it. And here's the gas price too. And I forgot to go out, but it's like, okay, so it's 39,000 shillings or 3,900 shillings for a liter.
Okay, that sounds very expensive.
Yeah. Now, here the thing is that 38,000 shillings is $1. So the the exchange rate is amazing. It's kind of cool to walk up to a ATM and ask for 1,000,000 shillings. And I have something I'll show you when I'm done with the show here. And yeah, so 1,000,000 shillings is about $250. So yeah, you go and you buy gas and you pay 100,000 shillings for gas. It's pretty crazy. What we call cottage industry is pretty big there too. So people just on their own property doing things like manufacturing bricks. Just taking mud, forming it into bricks, and then firing it. That's a pretty big business. And then carpentry too. So here's on the other side, it's just some people outside on a street building beds and chairs and things like that. Probably coffins too. Housing, lots of different kinds of housing throughout Uganda. So you have, this is the top one here. This is a rural area where you have what you might think of more when you think of people living in Africa, where you have a house that's made with mud and maybe some thatch roof, maybe some metal roof on it too. But that's how some people live. But that's not how everybody lives. This is one of the houses at the seminary. So, here it's brick. It's got a nice tile roof. This is my friend Peter again. He's got a solar panel on his house, so he can have electricity then too. This is the farmhouse that I showed earlier, and it's a really pretty nice house. So it's probably made of brick, but then covered over with plaster. Got some nice doors on there and a metal roof then too. And then this is my friend Enoch and his wife Prasi. And they have an apartment in the city. And so I think this is like a 6-story apartment building. And they live in number 1 on the bottom floor.
This is a good time for Keelan's question here.
Okay.
Do people have TVs in their houses? Yes,
they do. So here is the wire coming out of Enoch's house, and that goes to a satellite dish. I visited his house. He has children the same age as mine, and they were sitting there watching PJ Masks. It's the same show my kids watch, right? They have satellite TV, and so they're watching Disney Junior, there in East Africa. Some people do have TVs in their house.
So and you might not know this number off the top of your head, but it looks like a lot of the ways they're getting electricity to their houses is through solar panels, especially if you're not in the city, I would guess. Is that a majority of the houses that have electricity there?
No, I would say not. The majority of the power in Uganda, the majority of the electricity is from hydroelectric power.
Oh, sure, because they're on the Nile.
So they're on the Nile. So they have a couple of dams, and that provides electricity for the whole country.
And now, did you say that most of the houses have, would you say most of the houses have electricity?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think you can find that on the CIA's World Fact Book. That would have.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have a link to the one-page fact thing right there in the description of the YouTube video that we're making right now.
Okay. So check that out. And that answer is probably on there. I think that's information they've got.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the slide I have about soccer. Here's people out on, this is a Sunday afternoon out playing soccer in a field. This is the bar where here you can't really see it. There's the solar panel up there. Here is the loudspeaker, and here is on that same pole the satellite dish. And on that sign it says, come. I think it was like Tuesday night. Watch. I think it was Bayern Munich and Manchester United play against each other. So you come here and they're going to have the TV on. Probably the only in that place. That's probably one of the few TVs in that little village that had a TV. Okay, so yeah, football, soccer is huge. This. So the town that I spent most of the time in was this town Jinja, and it has I forget how many thousand. It's several. It's significantly bigger than like Litchfield, but not as big as like Springfield. But still, you have here's a herd of goats going through town. Here's people on the side of the road where you would have like a meat or like the just grass on the side of the road. Well, instead of that, people just went in and planted corn. And it was the end of the season for corn, and so that the corn is all down. But why waste space, right? Grow some food there if you can. It's a good deal. I got just a couple of slides about the church there. The Lutheran Church in Uganda began in 1994. They've got about 150 congregations, about 50,000 members. They have 25 elementary schools and 1 high school. But for all of that, they don't have that many pastors, and so that's why the seminary is very important. They're training their own pastors now too. Ministry in Uganda is very different in rural and urban areas, and they're trying to do both. So this is a rural congregation here on the one side, and all the people that were there one Sunday for a baptism, you can see they've got their own church building. They're working on it. One of the things that people do throughout the continent of Africa is that instead of waiting until you have all of the money to complete a project, you just go ahead and build as much as you can, or borrowing the money because it's very hard to get a loan in Africa. So they just, as they get enough money to build part of it, they build that part of it and just use it as they can. So this building doesn't have windows yet, but they're still using it as their church.
Cool.
And then this one over here, this is also Enoch. Enoch's here and here. He's the pastor of I'm gonna forget the name of the congregation. I think it's Grace, maybe in Jinja, and it's a very small congregation. The Sunday I was there, I think there were about 20 people, and we were meeting in a school classroom. So obviously in a rural area, it's a lot easier to get land than it is in an urban area. And so the churches in urban areas kind of struggle because it's hard for them to be visible. We have the advantage here in the United States that a lot of our churches grew up around the same time as our cities and towns were expanding.
Sure.
But in Uganda, so it was easy for them to get land in town and build nice big buildings in town. In Uganda, where they're just now starting out, the towns and cities are already established. And so people already own all that land, and so it's hard to get land in town. to build a church. And so, they're it's kind of a struggle then. What happens when people move from a rural area to town? Are they able to find a church then? And so it's a hard thing. Let's see. What are some of their future plans? To establish more churches, to build a new church in the capital, Kampala, to have more high schools, to have more elementary schools, and to have a microfinance program. Which, what that is something where people every month contribute a certain amount to it, and then every month someone gets to receive a larger gift from that to go and do something, for their business to support their family, something like that. And it's based on kind of community need. If they're done well, it works really well. Of course, it's also a huge temptation for things to go wrong, then too, when you're dealing with money. So they want to do that and do it well. And then also to provide clean water and even healthcare in rural areas then too. All right, so here's just a picture of this is the same kind of thing that we saw before, where a building's not all the way completed, but they're still using it. So here's one of the classrooms, and it needs paint on the wall, it needs a ceiling, and it needs a floor. But they're still using it, and it works. So this is what the classroom that I taught in was like. And this is what it'll look like when it's finished. This is the library, and I think even now they've got shelves up in there and more stuff put together.
Okay, now we do want to have some time to do some extra question and answers. So, well, here we go. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. So there's so this is me, and this is the class that I taught. Those guys it was pretty great.
Very cool. And it was what, February of
last year.
Okay. Let's see. So, let's go through some of these.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Now let's see. Here's a question from Dade. What do Ugandans think of Americans, and what was your first impression?
Yeah. Okay. So what Ugandans think of Americans, generally the relationship is pretty good, because when Americans come to Uganda, it's largely to help and to help with the things that they know their country needs, and that's the reason why most Ugandan or most Americans are going to Uganda. You have or they're coming to go to the national parks and see the animals, in which case they're spending money. So that's always a great thing, right? To help out the economy for them too. So I mean, generally, I'd say that the perception is pretty good. Of there is still throughout Africa this kind of feeling that, okay, if how do I say this well? That I'll say it this way. It's good for Americans when we go there to be encouraging, to not say, you need to be doing it this way, because we're just coming in. I was just coming in for 2 weeks, and so what do I know? In 2 weeks, you basically know that
nothing.
I really don't know what's going on here, right? There's a lot more to it than I can learn in 2 weeks.
Well, I'm glad you're the one telling us about Uganda then, if you know nothing.
Right. I know enough to come back and tell you basic facts, but why a lot of things are. Yeah. So my first impression, it was good. I liked it. I felt when I first got to Uganda, it was good to be back in Africa. It'd been a long time since I'd been there, and so it was good to be back with friends. So that was my first impression of Uganda, I guess.
All right. You talked about this briefly. What's the weather like there? You talked about there not being 4 seasons. What? And you were there in February, which is the end of their winter for you?
Right. So end of the dry season, beginning of the rainy season. That was the hottest time of the year.
Okay.
So it would probably get close to 100. But no. To 90 or so. It probably around the 90s. And it would cool off a little bit at night then too. But that was quite a shock coming from Like we'd had an ice storm here in Missouri the day before I left, and so going from an ice storm to burning hot, that was a shock to my system.
I
I
bet.
drank 5 liters of water the first day I was there, and sweated most of it out. It was just such a shock to my system.
Is
Yeah.
it good there?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of humid. It's weird because you're on the equator, but the elevation it's pretty high elevation. So you don't that cools you off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it wasn't any more unbearable than July or August in Illinois.
Gotcha.
No.
We looked at that population pyramid and we talked about how of a population of 40 million, 15 million are kids. Why is that?
It's because people are having big families. This is something that you'll find the exact number on the CIA World Fact Book, but the average woman in Uganda has, I think it's like 5 kids. So on the one hand, that's so it's just that there's just so many kids being born there too. There is also a struggle to access good healthcare, and so a lot of adults die younger than usual here.
Here's a question from Nolan. Is there much crime in Uganda? If so, what types?
Oh, okay. That I'm not going to know the answer to exactly. I know it's not as bad as places like South Africa. You do still have a lot of the, you lock your room. There are gates and things all over the place that you lock. Yeah, I don't know. It's not as much as South Africa. I can say that.
Okay. What would let's see. I think I've gotten to all of the ones that the kids have asked. One of the things, what's the biggest thing about the people there that sticks out to you? We know that people are people wherever we go, right? And but what's something that is a part of their culture that really sticks out?
People are very welcoming, and it is an honor to receive people as a guest.
Gotcha.
It's so cool to go and visit people and be with them, and especially as coming as part of the church and going there with the church and knowing that you already have that connection that is deeper, that here we share the same faith, we've been united with Christ together at baptism, and we will be together forever. I don't know, you get a sense of that already when you go there.
Now, talk for a second. Now, all of this, I was just thinking, a ton of stuff in your life changed because you spent a semester in Pretoria, South Africa, right? The Africa connection is how you met your wife. It allowed you to go back and do this. Tell us a little bit about one of the ways that a good way for American kids to see the world is to study abroad somewhere. How did that happen?
Yeah. So what happened for me was when I was in high school, I took as much dual credit classes as I could, and so I took like 2 years of chemistry. It's like, why in the world am I ever going to use chemistry? That got 10 college credits taking 2 years of chemistry, which is almost, 16 credits as a semester, and that's what I think I wound up with. And so I was able to graduate from college a semester early. And so I had this free semester, and my advisor said, well, you should go spend it in Africa. And so I did. Dr. Weber, who we referenced before, was actually staying at our house at that time for or something. And so Dad asked him. I think Uncle Herb may have pulled a few strings too, but I got to do that. But there are tons of ways to get to do that, to study abroad, and I would definitely recommend doing that wherever in the world it happens to be. And you go to some place like Europe or East Asia, and take the chance to travel and get to do that. You'll learn a lot more about the world and about yourself too. You get to try a lot of new things and experience a lot of things that are really, really very cool.
Awesome. Let's see. What would be your favorite place that you've traveled to? Not just Uganda, but anywhere.
Let's see. Probably. I mean, for right now, I think it still might have to be somewhere in South Africa. Probably somewhere in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, which is where Julia worked before we got married. And probably one of the game parks there, where you just get to see incredible landscape and get to see like elephants and lions and zebras and giraffes and things like that.
So are there those game parks in Uganda too?
There are. I just didn't get to go there this time.
Oh, yeah, you're only there for 2 weeks. Yeah,
I was only there for 2 weeks. I think next time I might go there a little bit longer and get to see Queen Victoria or Queen Elizabeth National Park is really pretty great. And Murchison Falls National Park is one of the ones that has all the animals too. And those are both pretty close to where, like my friend Enoch was like, yeah, he grew up pretty close to Queen Elizabeth National Park. And so next time we go there, I think we're going to try and go to back to his place to see where his dad is doing ministry, and hopefully maybe get to see the park too. Cool. That's the southwest corner of Uganda. But I mean, yeah, here's the amazing thing. Okay, Queen Elizabeth II has been queen so long that when Uganda became independent in 1962, she was the queen. And the country has had its whole history, and she's still the queen. She's still the queen, right? So,
do they have a parliamentary government with hers, the head of state?
No, she is not the head of state, but they are part of the Commonwealth of Nations.
Okay,
which is kind of the countries participate together in some. It's most of the former British colonies.
Gotcha.
Except for us, obviously, and a few others too. But they work together on some things too. I have some money here if you want me to. I can.
Oh yeah, let's see the money.
Okay. So here's a 50,000. So again, this is worth about $10, I think.
Okay.
Or maybe I have that wrong. I forget mine. Wait, I've got that right here. Wait, $1 is worth. Yeah, about 4,000. That's right. Yeah, about 4,000. So this is worth about $12. And you got a gorilla there on it, and that's one of the things that a lot of people go to Uganda to see. It's one of the last places in the world where you can go see gorillas out in the wild. I want to show you, where's the one that has the. Okay, so here's a $2,000 or 2,000 shilling one, and you can kind of see there is a tilapia on it.
Oh yeah,
and it's on a couple of the coins too. I don't know how you'll be able to see that. Yeah, you can see there's a tilapia on the coin, and then on the other side is the seal. It's got a it's a crest, it's a crane, and then an antelope kind of thing with a shield in the middle.
Gotcha. Well, I know you got to get rolling at 10. It just last thing. When we pray for what God's doing in Uganda, what should we specifically pray for?
Yeah, right now with the coronavirus going on, the whole country is shut down, and so Uganda is a place that I heard some of our missionaries talk about it. I think earlier this week or last week, and they're saying that they have experience with dealing with massive outbreaks. They've dealt with Ebola before. They've dealt with Ebola very well, actually. And one of the ways they do is kind of by shutting things down. So that makes it very hard for people who were already struggling before to get things like food. And so pray that the church would use this as an opportunity to be able to continue to reach out and share God's love with people, and also share the help that they need too.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Jacob, appreciate you coming on and telling us about Uganda. We'll end the broadcast here. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We'll see you guys later.
See you later.